Hello and welcome to the next lesson of Cylinder Radio. I'm Reusch, high school teacher, now podcaster. And today I have on Stefanos Stefandos. He is a speaker, author, coach, educator. He's one of those people, I've had several on the podcast. They're really hard to box in. But his area of focus and the area where I want to talk to him about is about relationships and in particular masculinity. I want to talk about masculinity and being a man and all that kind of stuff in that realm today. And Stefanos is the guy that I wanted to talk to about this because I've seen what he puts out there. And I think it's really valuable, especially for young people, because I think, which we'll probably get into, there's a lot of mistakes that can be made. You do a lot of damage to come to understanding the stuff that we'll probably talk about. So Stefanos, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Can you just introduce yourself to the audience that might not be familiar and tell us why you would be a good person to talk to about things like masculinity and relationships?
Yeah, it's just an area of, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate that. Look, am I an expert? Maybe, maybe not. I've been in this space for many years. It's something that I'm continuing to educate myself on. I reflect deeply on my own personal experiences. I've been through peaks and troughs and extremes on the spectrum of human experience and what it means to be a man and what it means to be human. Am I any more well qualified than others? Maybe, maybe not. I research this space intensely and I reflect diligently on my own experiences. I combine that with the producing of various programs in the realm of relationships and masculinity as well, frameworks and models that I've created, and continue to do so and continue to evolve that space, and add emerging theories to that space as well. And I work with people day in, day out on a private level, on a small group level, on a large group level. I speak in front of hundreds of people at times and even more, online and offline. And so I immerse myself in the space. And it's very, very important to me because I see the value in the direct enhancing of our relationships, allow our humanity to thrive, our socioeconomic systems, our geopolitical systems, our cultures, our technology and innovation, the integrity and the quality of our relationships lend themselves to how we behave and how we perform as a greater collective.
Yeah, and I bring on people on this show that come from different backgrounds. And I have on very, highly esteemed college professors and people that, grew up in the school of hard knocks. And what I've found is that there are so many ways that you can bring value and real, solid information and perspective. This I was gonna say this class. This podcast is all about perspective, and that can come from a whole bunch of different places. And that's why some people, it's very easy to box them in. Well, they have this degree in this and this degree in that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will get the desired results. And I think that in the education system, which is where I'm kind of live my existence, is there is this one way and this one way to do things. And this is where your knowledge comes from. And this is where all of your perspective comes from, is just from this one kind of system of high school, college, university. But and I just don't think that holds up anymore. We have access to too much information. We have access to too many people. And I think that we're much better off to get a wide variety of different people with different backgrounds who all bring something really valuable to the table. So thank you for trying to break that down and explaining that to us a bit.
Yeah, I hear that, man. I agree with you too. I just, on that, it's interesting when you said that, it reminded me of a gentleman, Jacques Fresco, the late Jacques Fresco, who created the Venus Project and who was a futurist in many respects and many other things. And he said that the generalist is the new specialist. And it's sort of what you just said then was, in the age and the era that we're moving in. And yes, I have a specialization as you do, but we're also, I think, in this day and age, you need to broaden your specialization and see how there are so many moving parts to this thing called life, and having awareness and deep awareness in multiple areas actually enhances the specialty or the specialization that we focus on as well.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So I think we're aligned in that way.
Yeah.
When we talk about masculinity and about, for young men or guys in general, about being a man, I think before we get into it, I want to hear your perspective, and I want you to share that with people because it's a big topic. But it's it's a mind when you go down this road, and I do talk to kids all the time. I talk to kids when I taught in the hood, talk to kids at private school, whatever. It's a minefield. If you start to talk to them about, like, you know, being a guy and what masculinity is, I feel like it's a minefield of just like corniness and stuff that just like, this is like touchy-feely nonsense that the guys who really need to hear it tune out. They turn it off as soon as you start talking about feelings and stuff like that, and they're the ones who need to have it. So how do you navigate that? Because this, like, even just having this conversation, I know I'm from like a blue collar town in Pennsylvania where, like, I know that people from my hometown are like, oh, you're having a podcast on masculinity, like, oh, what, look at you, like, you're so soft and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, wow, that is a real perspective that for you who's in this space all the time. How do you navigate through that? Or do you just bulldoze it down and say screw it? Or do you like, are you trying to be nimble working on that? How conscious of that are you when you go through this practice?
Yeah, I'm very aware of that. And I'm very aware that there are many opinions and theories, not only on masculinity, but also on femininity and the attachment of that construct to gender and biology, and does that exist and does that not exist? But let me go back a little bit and speak about masculinity. And so there's a gentleman that I agree with many of his theories. His name's Jack Donovan, and he speaks a great deal to masculinity in the age of man. And he's developed a lot of his theories from Western philosophers such as Nietzsche specifically, and you know, the philosophy of Stoicism and the ancient Greeks and German tribes, ancient German tribes or older German tribes and Viking tribes and so forth, and has also looked at the evolution of man, right? And so it comes down to two things. It comes down to being a good man and being good at being a man. And the two are very, very different. And so we, as men, masculinity, one of the key concepts of masculinity is challenge. So generally, and this is a part that is also linked to men, we can't completely separate masculinity from gender or femininity from gender. That doesn't mean that masculinity and femininity as a contrasted state or expressive state doesn't exist within each person. It does. So you will have feminine qualities and I will have feminine qualities and masculine qualities, and you will have masculine qualities. It's two sides of the same coin. And so when we're talking about unity consciousness or being whole, it's this merging or this expression in a healthy way of masculinity and femininity, right? But when we're speaking to pure masculinity, it's not, oh, only men can be masculine. Definitely not. You will see, though, you will notice, even with the various cultures in the world, most men, not all, but most men, as an example, will carry a core and expressive essence of masculinity as opposed to femininity. Some men, though, will, and some women will carry a core essence of masculinity. Absolutely, nothing wrong or right with that. It's not about that. When we're talking about masculinity and men, which is what I think what you're asking here, there's two things: being good at being a man and being a good man. Being a good man is a subjective cultural paradigm. Being good at being a man is grounded a little more in our evolution, our physiology, and let me explain. So, you know, I spoke about challenge, and most men in today's day and age will follow the path of least resistance and not even try to engage in any form of challenge. And that's a product of our environment, our culture, our society, our values, collective values. And so this will continue to produce social issues and disconnection in regards to how men are in the world, basically because it's not in our nature to not be in front of challenge. That doesn't mean our lives have to be difficult. It means that we grow and we expand our consciousness, our awareness, and ourselves when we are challenged in healthy ways. So we have to understand that men particularly have evolved from our caveman days of pure fight, flight, freeze. We've been responsible for extending the perimeter. We've been responsible for keeping our environment safe. So we've been very physical in our environment through challenges. Our environment and landscape is very different to what it used to be. However, much of what, not much, but an amount, our neurology, our hormonal profiling, our brain development, our collective unconscious of what drives us or what's responsible for helping maintain some level of homeostasis within men is derived from a very long time ago. And so we also have to understand that our consciousness has evolved massively in the way we see ourselves, the world. We understand the cosmos, reality, linear perceptions of time have changed. Our brain development and prefrontal cortex has evolved. So it's not purely invested in hormones and evolution. Our social systems are far more complex and layered than they used to be. And our brain development has skyrocketed. So when we go back to looking at the role of man, and we're looking at the role of masculinity, we get to look at a couple of different things. And we get to look at, firstly, there's a model I have called the 5 Ps of masculinity, or the 5 pillars of masculinity. And in those, and I don't want to spend too much time just on this yet because I want to go somewhere else first, but there's protect, provide, pursue, procreate, and presence. And I'll touch on that later if you want. But the most important thing where I want to go, and this is what Jack Donovan speaks to, he speaks of tactical virtues, and he's got 4, and I've added another one. And there are 5 tactical virtues that aren't exclusive to man. However, man has required these set of expressive virtues and truths more than women in order to evolve and grow into who we are today. And so those 5 tactical virtues, and I've added an additional one. The 5 are strength, courage, mastery, honor, and connectivity, connection. And so when we're talking about masculinity, if we're talking about something that's more tangible and objective, if as men we honor these 5 tactical virtues in a healthy way, we get to start experiencing what it means to be a healthy man in modern times. And the connectivity piece that I've added there is because I've looked at it and I thought, no one's an island, no man is an island. And we've largely not evolved in solitude. We've evolved in tribe. We've evolved in being connected. And this is an important part of who we are. So we're talking about strength. We're talking about not being lazy in our bodies. We're talking about being active in our bodies. That means having confidence in our physical selves, being strong in our nervous system, carrying bone density. Having courage in our bodies is very important. Courage is connected to challenge. We've been challenged for millennia upon hundreds of thousands, millions of years in terms of humanoids. When we remove challenge from our environment, we're almost removing a very real part of who we are in the world. Mastery is very important as well, because mastery allows us to create, at least our version of creation. You have to understand that women are the ultimate creators. They carry a baby in their bodies and give birth. Men don't have that gift. Yes, we contribute to that, of course, but we don't have that very direct, visceral experience. So our experience of creation is through our mastery, through being active with our hands, through creating in the world. Hence why we've grown so rapidly, socio-culturally and socio-economically. Honor is the 4th tactical virtue, and honor is very important because honor is our way of self-identifying and also valuing who we are by being in integrity with our word. If we say we're going to do something, we must do it. Having that honor, bringing our craft or value or our mastery or our sense of worth to the tribe, that's us having our honor. And the connectivity piece is doing that in tribe, working together, building in togetherness, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your work group, whether it's in your community, whether it's in your state or your nation. The connectivity piece is very important. And without that, we're almost not creating in a full capacity. And so when we speak, brother, about masculinity, that's where I go first, because talking about being a good man and carrying masculine traits, energetics are different to traits, but it can get very subjective and very opinionated. And of course, this is an opinion as well, because it can be argued against, right? I get that. But it's a little more objective because we're almost looking at what's our quote unquote natural state of being. and bringing that into today's world, because it still has a place, but with variation, taking into consideration the brain development, the complex nature of our societies, the way that we've grown as a species, consciousness, all of that stuff, right? And then we try and find a balance point from there. So that's how I immediately generally respond to, okay, what is masculinity? And then I talk to the energetics of it, and I provide information about that around feminine, masculine energetics. And then we can go into characteristics and traits and the more subjective essence of what it means to be a man. Because then there's a triad of being a man as well. There's the archetype of the Dalai Lama or Mahatma Gandhi, which is a spiritual still type. Then there's the comedic type. There's a triad of archetypes. Then there's the Clint Eastwood type, the stoic, very strong, presentful man. And when we talk about masculinity, how do we dance as men between those three archetypes as well? And there's another way to sort of start breaking through into masculinity.
Yeah, and we're all individuals. I mean, I agree with you so much. I love evolutionary biology, and just whenever I'm like, why am I acting like this? Why is that person acting that way? Just to tune into like, what would this look like when we were cavemen? Because we're writing genetics that are like 25,000 years old, pretty much unchanged. And so we're surrounded by, we're on Zoom calls, and we're on our phone, and we're on social media, but we're still complicated apes. And we got to remember that. But yeah, I think, like think about like Jocko Willink, I have his book back there, like Jocko Willink or, a Joe Rogan type, like they are able to go down this road. I think that like hearing like Joe Rogan's podcast opened that up a little bit for me, because at the end of the day, or Jocko Willink or something, he can talk about, being vulnerable in certain ways. And those are just two that just come to mind for me, but like there's a lot, is because they, like all the things that you mentioned, Stephanos, are all things that we respect as men. It's just like talking about it seems to be not okay, but like all the stuff about being physically strong, clearly we look at our sports stars, clearly we look up to that. Like the idea that you can protect yourself, being a protector and provider. When you say, be a good man, or being a good man and good at being a man, like what makes something good? Because, this water bottle is not a good pillow. So first you have to have, what is the goal of that item?
Utility
tool. Pillow would be soft. What is the goal of a man, right? So you have to think about that and decide that for yourself, outside of society. Like, what is a man? What is it? How do you do that? And then are you doing that well? And if it's protector and provider, providing might be money, but not emotionally then, right? So I want to talk about emotions, because, this is something where there are a lot of men, I think, who say, hey, I provide for my wife, or I provide for my kids because they have the new PlayStation, or, we live in a nice house. Like, there are lots of ways you can define providing, right? Or protecting. Because like, do you really need to be able to swing a battle axe anymore? You have a security system. So how do you protect the people that you, in your community or in your family? So, when it comes to the emotional side of that, it seems like men are it's only acceptable to cry like when a kid is born, someone close to them dies, or their sports team wins or loses. Like, where do you see like emotions coming into play with this whole thing? Because that's kind of like, I feel like that's something that is difficult to talk about, and what a lot of men do, and I know we've talked about this, is like they cage it. Like the stoic, I'll just push it down. But I think maybe the goal, and I'll hear your thoughts on this, is to tame your emotions. Like, be able to recognize them, say like, oh, hello, sadness. Hello, let me see what this feels like. Okay, feel. So you can kind of like tame it, not just cage it. A caged animal isn't tamed. And as soon as the cage is open, then it's uncontrolled. Where just be familiar, really get in tune with your emotions, so that you can kind of go about your life and use those emotions to your advantage and not your disadvantage. Does that seem to align, or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I definitely align with what you're saying. And when we're speaking to understanding and connecting our emotions to what's happening in our world, if we suppress or numb, which is more of a recent psychological phenomena, it's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for us as individuals, and it's not healthy for our relationships. People bear the brunt of that in a negative way generally. And it's usually we're either lashing out, we're hyper frustrated, we're agitated, we're short tempered, we're hyper aggressive, or we're very withdrawn from the world. And none of that is healthy. None of that makes sense for us in terms of creating flourishing, harmonious relationships. It's never about numbing our emotions. And I guess, again, this is more of a recent development. It is about understanding our emotions and being able to be with them, dance with them, play with them, move with them in a healthy way. And what that looks like for me, I have a very clear system. So if someone is in a relationship and they're feeling maybe fear for whatever reason, maybe they're about to lose their job and they're feeling fear, instead of numbing it with alcohol or taking drugs or watching excessive TV or pretending the issue doesn't exist, is acknowledging and taking ownership and responsibility of that issue. In other words, first port of call is being self-reliant. Thoreau spoke about this extensively. We can look to many of the great minds of the past because a lot of their wisdom is very prevalent today and very relevant today. And so being a self-reliant human being, particularly for men, is very, very important. And I want to come back to something that you said about protection and swinging a battle axe and so forth. We'll come back to that in a moment. So the self-reliance piece is very important. Once you've been long enough, and long enough, you'll know when long enough is. Once you've been long enough, I'm not talking about being in isolation, I'm talking about being in critical reflection and solitude, because emptiness is a masculine quality. The need or the yearning to be empty, and empty so that you can observe in greater stillness and clarity what is happening within you, is a masculine quality. The yearning to be full of experience, full of emotion, full of people, full of ideas, full of crowds, that's a feminine quality. It's not that only women want to be like that. It's nothing to do with that. And it has something to do with that, but nothing to do with that fundamentally. So the emptiness is very important. Men need to get empty. Be in stillness, observe what is happening within them. Emotions are not a phenomenon of the female brain only. Female and male brains are different, by the way, slightly in different ways. The emotions and emotional regulation, feeling emotion, processing, it's not only a product of the limbic system, but largely responsible for emoting is the limbic system and other areas of the brain. We all have that. So men aren't immune to that. So we have to be with those emotions. So let's be self-reliant, analyze, observe, witness, non-judgmentally, be with, feel the pain or feel the difficulty, feel the discomfort in solitude. After a period of time, if we can't come to some form of resolution, and even if we do come to a form of resolution, bring that feeling or that unresolved emotion or resolved emotion to the tribe. Bring it to a group of brothers that you're close with, that you trust, that you have loyalty with, that you're connected to, that see you, that witness you, that can give you a perspective that is outside of yourself because you're too in it. That's the second thing. You'll find reprieve in that. If then you still cannot find reprieve, seek professional help, people that deal with the mind and the heart-body connection, heart-mind-body connection. Psychologists, a counselor, a shaman, a spiritual guide, a healer, whatever it may be. Then bring it to your wife or to your partner. Don't let her have this raw, or don't let them experience this raw version of you that's uncontrollable, because that can be very fucking scary and very daunting. And that's a process that I have. Now, I wanted to say something about the protection piece, about the battle axe, right? There's something very primal about tapping into that aspect of self. The strength piece is not only about physical strength, but it's about mental strength and body strength as well. And I'm just talking about your ability to bench press or back squat or deadlift or clean or move a boulder or whatever it is. It's your fortitude and resilience. It's your ability to move through challenge and your ability to recover through challenge. One of the ways that we do that well, we have a very direct visceral experience with, is through physically challenging our bodies. And so controlled violence, as an example, whether it be boxing or jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or martial arts in some form, is very good for any human being actually, but particularly for men, because it gives us not only an outlet to deal with the heightened aggression that men usually feel because of the heightened hormonal profile of testosterone that we have, which lends itself to can lend itself to more intense behavior that's outwardly projected. And females experience that too in different ways. But it's very, very healthy to be confident in the body and know how to protect and how to fight. Not because you need to fight, not because you need to hurt someone, and not because you need to be protecting yourself constantly or your family, because that's coming from a consistent fear state, and we don't want that.
Yeah.
Because it feels natural to have that confidence in the self. And someone that's authentically, genuinely, humbly confident in themselves doesn't go cause trouble, doesn't have ego and go out into the world with that ego and hurt other people with the skills that they have. That's not what it's about. And so there has to be that element of trusting in our bodies. And whilst not every man needs to know how to throw an axe or wield an axe or whatever it may be, having that confidence in their body is very important for many reasons.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. I mean, I just had Kenny Florian on like 2 episodes ago, and just talking about like the ability to fight. I've had on a couple of jiu-jitsu black belts. Because jiu-jitsu and martial arts are not just a part of my life, but I see what it does in men. Like
Yeah.
I've had so many friends and students who were really filled with ego, were just like assholes in a lot of ways. And then they go into a jiu-jitsu gym, they get humbled, they get smashed by someone half their size. And then they start to get better. They become they just get more aware of what's happening, what's going on. Is that mine? Bo, can you go, please? Okay, buddy. Please go. Thank you. I'll have to remember when that was so I can edit that out. Bo, please close the door. Sorry about that.
Oh, good man.
Scene. Okay.
You're right. You're right when you say that about the man. I come from a stand-up background, like boxing and Muay Thai, a little bit of Muay Thai, more boxing, right?
Okay.
And I can't do jiu-jitsu at the moment for Corona reasons, obviously. Not everything's shut down, right? So I've just gone back to boxing, which I always do a little bit of that every week. Once or twice a week, I'll do something just by myself. So again, I'm not sparring at the moment because I can't do that, but whatever. But man, I'd go to jiu-jitsu, and I'm really adept in my body. I've been utilizing my body in different ways for many, many years. When I go to jiu-jitsu, I'm getting fucking owned, man. Owned by people that the only reason I have some level of survival is because I'm adept and strong in my body, but that only gets me so far. I'm humbled, man, by people that are half my size, that are 10 years younger than me, that are not even breaking a sweat and breathing, and I'm like contorted. It's ridiculous, and it's beautifully humbling, man. It really is.
And I think that's just something that I just always want to promote. And it's I don't think it's a coincidence that it comes up then when we're talking about masculinity. And I didn't even bring it up. You brought it up because of course you do martial arts. Like, I don't know, it just seems like it'd be hard to speak from a place of masculinity and things like that. If you, I don't know, maybe I'm just really biased, but I just think it's almost like a necessity. And it's interesting, it gets into I heard you talk before about the concept of manning up, and that kind of goes hand in hand with this idea that we all saw the Gillette commercial about toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And like, I get the intention. I get the intention, but I don't think it aligns with the data. I think the data seems to be pretty clear that it's the lack of a father in the household. There are bad fathers for sure that screw up their kids, for sure. But it seems like it's more the lack of father or positive male role models is really the problem. And things like kids wrestling, yeah, you don't want your kid to beat up anybody, but where is that balance between being masculine and being a little aggressive and working hard and like grunting in the gym? Like Planet Fitness, if you grunt on deadlifts, they kick you out. So
what?
Yeah.
You fucking serious?
Yes. So there's videos on YouTube about it, and I have friends that went, that if you grunt too loud lifting weights, they will kick you out. So it's toxic masculinity. Where do you find that balance, Stefanos, of like, what is considered toxic masculinity, if we're going to just use that verbiage, and then what is considered like masculinity? Where is that line? Where would you say that line goes where like, okay, now this is not going to be beneficial, useful, things along those lines?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the word toxic masculinity, only because of the negative connotations associated with it. The term in and of itself, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. There is toxic masculinity and there's toxic femininity. All it means essentially is it's extreme behavior in that expressive state. Let me give you an example. Doing energy, so we're talking about energetics now. So let me give you some synonyms for masculine energy. Do, go, exclusive. These are energetic states. Doing energy, go energy, exclusive energy, okay? So we don't even have to use the term masculine energy if we don't want to. And Michaela Boehm speaks a great deal to the do and the go energy in masculinity. It's the be and the flow energy in femininity. And I've added this exclusivity, inclusivity in the feminine. The feminine is a more inclusive energy. It's more cooperative and collaborative, whereas the masculine is more of an exclusive style of leadership, as an example. It's more, I'm going to do this because this is for the good of the tribe, and I'm going to not really include you, but I am including you, but I'm going to do it exclusively by myself. It's just the energetic. It's not bad or good. Sometimes we need that type of leadership or energetic, and other times we need more of an inclusive, collaborative one. For example, the world where it is today, it doesn't need more fucking exclusive energy. It needs right now a little bit more inclusive, collaborative energy, right? And a balance of that. Anyway, that's another conversation. So this toxicity is just extreme behavior that's unsustainable over a period of time. So I'll give you a tangible example. Let's say a man is, just finished university, studied accounting and finance, and he wants to hit Wall Street. He's all about status and titles and accumulation of material wealth. Nothing wrong with that. But if he does that at the expense of his health, at the expense of these other things that he says he values, such as family, if he does that and he hurts people, if he does that in a corrupt way, that's morally misaligned, that's extreme behavior. That energetic that he's in of doing, I have to do more to get my self-worth. I have to work 20 hours a day to make sure that I feel worthy. I have to complete as many things as I can on a daily basis at the expense of my health, because that makes me feel better about who I am, because I never got the approval of my father or validated as a kid when I needed to be. That's extreme behavior. That's toxic masculinity. It's a toxic energetic. It's an unhealthy energetic. But to blatantly say that, and because some people say this, that toxicity only exists in masculine energy, is bullshit, because you can't have one without the other. You can't physically know masculine without knowing feminine, because what is masculine in relationship to, and vice versa. So we're in it together. It's two sides of the same coin. It's a polarity. It's not separate. Unity, everyone talks about unity and coming together. That doesn't exist. What are you bringing together when you say coming together? You're bringing in separate things or separate parts. And at the fundamental level, it's two separate things at a fundamental level. In this instance, it's masculine, feminine, energetic coming together to form a unity and work together. Has to happen within self first. I'll give you another example. Can I do in the world, but also spend time being? And being means maybe being in stillness, maybe not having to accomplish anything and base that accomplishment on, oh, I'm now worthy enough to receive love, or worthy enough to receive a paycheck, or worthy enough to receive food, or worthy enough to take myself on vacation because I've done so much. Like there can be an unhealthy relationship with those things. And we know what that is. We know when we're too far in it. We just can't acknowledge it or see it. We know it in our nervous system because we experience it, but we can't acknowledge it or see it because we're too far in it. Hence why I revert back to be self-reliant. When that doesn't work, have a tribe that gives you feedback and says, hey, I'm calling you out on your bullshit, or hey, I want to challenge you in a healthy way to pull you forward, or hey, I'm concerned about you. Super important.
Yeah. No, that's great. We just have to keep ourselves paying attention about, like, are we veering off of what we know to be right? Are we losing track of it? Are we getting caught up in keeping up with the Joneses, or looking at what Bob 2 cubicles down just bought, or whatever? Yeah. You got to be careful with all of that. And it is seductive. I mean, I get it. I buy into that stuff too. And it gets seductive. You got to be really conscious. It's just like if you grew up in an abusive household, you are most likely going to abuse unless it goes on the forefront of your mind. Like, no, I am not going to do that. But if you just go, I'm sure I won't because I know how it feels bad. Like, no, like you probably will. You have to make this a conscious effort. The last topic I want to talk about is you do stuff with relationships as well. And, having taught high school now for like 14 years or something like that, I deal with a lot of kids who are going through breakups and liking, let's just talk about boys now for now. Girls is a whole different thing that, that's a whole different complicated thing. But for young men is, how do they get the girls to like them? Nice guys finish last, all of that kind of stuff, going through breakups. So I guess the first thing is about like just getting girls to, like you or whatever it is, and also about breakups, because guys, there's a movie that came out a while ago, like a Ryan Gosling movie called Blue Valentine, I think it's called. And in that movie, he says something like, guys resist settling down for a lot of their like youth. They're like, I don't want to settle down. I don't want to settle down. I don't want to settle down. So when they do, they commit. I'm committed to this woman, and she betrays him in some way that, it's like the breakup is actually harder on the guys sometimes than it is on the girls. Maybe the guys can't as easily just like go out to the club and hook up, or whatever it is. Maybe their friends won't be as comforting as her friends might be to her, or whatever it is. Guys resist settling down. So when they do commit, I am committed to this woman 100%, and she betrays him, that it's really crushing to guys, and guys can't really talk about it. So it manifests in, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. So it manifests in this anger. How do you approach guys who go through hard breakups? Even if they're 15 years old, I mean, that's a big deal to them. And what kind of advice would you give to someone who's experiencing this? Obviously, it's going to be it's a very personal thing, but just like general things for people to think about.
It's very, very important to cultivate confidence within oneself, particularly for men. And so one of the ways that we cultivate confidence is, again, coming back. I'm just focusing on the basics, man. I'm not getting overly complicated. I'm not, and I can do that, but I don't think that's always useful.
Yeah.
Come back in the body. Be adept and confident in your body. That's one way to develop confidence. Challenge yourself on a regular basis. So it's one thing to deal with a breakup, and I'm going to give you some more tips in a moment, but it's one thing to deal with a breakup in a curative way. It's another thing to deal with challenge and disharmony and difficulty in life when you come from a more preventative mindset. So you do all the things in life that help you cope with and deal with difficulty. So you practice being resilient and confident, as an example, by challenging yourself regularly. So as a young man, a boy, being in the physical body, challenging self regularly is really, really important for dealing with adversity in any way. Having a practice of being emotionally resilient by actually allowing oneself to experience the spectrum of emotions, very important. So in other words, not being afraid to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a very important thing for every human being, but it has to be done in the right way at the right time with the right people. You have to feel safe. You have to feel that you're not judged. So that leads me to the next thing, being surrounded by people that are very healthy, that support you during your pain, that don't judge you, that don't torment you, or that don't isolate you. That's another thing. Don't isolate yourself when you're lonely, or when you're experiencing a temporary bout of loneliness, or when you're moving through a breakup. Know your self-worth. Knowing your self-worth means that when you do have a breakup, one of the reasons why men struggle particularly with breakups, beyond a certain age more than below, is because a couple of things. One, they don't believe in themselves enough. Number one.
Like that they can get another girl or something.
Correct, yeah, and that they're valuable enough to do so. They usually mask it with a facade of, oh yeah, they appear to be valued, they appear to believe in themselves, but they don't. It's a false bravado. And inside, they haven't done that inner work and healed that inner child that's been traumatized or hurt, abused in some way, because most children have, not all, but most, physically, emotionally, sexually abused. Most children have been, boys and girls. The rates of sexual abuse in boys is very high. It's informally probably 60-70%, and in females is probably 80-90% in little girls. Informally. Formally it's less than that, but it's still very high.
Well, yeah, and it's a very subjective thing too. I mean, if it's traumatizing to you, then it was traumatizing. Especially
correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So dealing with that is very important. Men aren't told and taught how to emote. And go back to what you said, we're told that anger's okay, but only so much anger as well. And that will only get us so far when we actually want to feel something else outside of anger. And so learning to emote is really, really important. having that work in self, where we're not, if a woman or if anyone, if you're in a partnership, it doesn't matter what your gender is, and that person does not want to be with you, actively pursuing them is a sign of very low self-worth. If someone doesn't want to be with you, they don't want to be with you. You don't need to understand it in the moment. The brain wants to try and keep safe, but we don't need to. What mitigates us from going down that rabbit hole and coming from desperation, isolation, and fear and insecurity and this needy attachment is this lack of self-worth, this lack of believing in self. And so you've got to clear up the past. You've got to do your inner work and be in that healthy space to really believe in yourself. And there are some things that young people can do. And another thing is keep yourself occupied with healthy distractions. No, don't numb yourself with alcohol and drugs and excessive TV. Get outside in nature and do it with an intention. Say, I'm sad right now and I'm going to spend some time in nature to feel a bit better about myself so I can process these feelings. And sometimes it does just take time, but it's also time coupled with deliberate intention, dealing with our stuff without suppressing that. So we don't bring the same issues into the next relationship. So get into nature, move your body, go for a run, go for a walk, train, exercise, go do BJJ, go box, go have some fun with friends. Know that you're doing that. Also then spend some time journaling to your thoughts, being in stillness, feeling the feelings that come up. Maybe it's just sadness, cry. Just cry, just feel the feelings and let them move through your body, because we register trauma and we register painful experiences or any experiences in two fundamental ways: cognitively, neurologically, intellectually, one way, and then somatically in our body, which is neurologically as well. So at a cellular level. And we have to not just only rewrite the stories of our pain, whether it be a painful breakup or experiencing physical abuse from our father when we were younger, but we have to release it through the body. And so when we emote and we move our bodies, that's very healthy. That's why when you said Planet Fitness doesn't allow you to grunt, I mean, fair enough, screaming and being out of control, that's ridiculous. But making some noise is very healthy because it's moving energy, especially when you're moving heavy weight and you're under challenge. That's a healthy thing. Breath, sound, and movement is an extremely powerful way to move stagnant, stuck emotions, thoughts, beliefs, energy in the body. So it's really important.
Yeah, I love what you said about, like it's a reflection on your self-esteem. Like one of the things I've said to kids, and I try to, it might sound weird at first, but like after I go into the conversation, they understand it, is like, it's actually good news if this girl doesn't want to be with you.
Yeah.
Because why would you want to be with someone that doesn't want to be with you? They don't see that you're great. And like I've had breakups. I'm sure you've had breakups. Like thank God, because it got me to my wife and my beautiful kids and things like that. Like I didn't know that it was a good thing at the time, and it was painful at the time. But why would you want to spend time with someone who doesn't want to spend time with you? I mean, think about that. That makes them less attractive if you're doing everything you can to be a good guy, and you think that like, wow, you know what, I'm working hard, I'm doing this, I'm helping people, I'm doing all this kind of stuff. She doesn't see that in me. Well, that's kind of her loss. It sounds so corny. Again, this is like what your grandma tells you, like, oh, it's her loss, but it actually is. And maybe there's nothing even wrong with you or wrong with her. Maybe it's just the match doesn't work, and that's perfectly fine for the match not to work.
That's the thing, man. I mean, it's the biggest part of all that is hindsight's a beautiful thing, and age and experience and diligent reflection on our experiences really lends itself to a maturity. Because when I was in my early 20s, I remember one of my first, big loves when I was like 18. I mean, she broke my heart, and at the time it was a gift, but at the time I was so devastated. I was I was just so angry and out of control and couldn't understand it and blame myself. And I wasn't in that solid place. And now how I deal with disappointment and difficulty is very, very different, very different. But I have the benefit of reflected hindsight is what I call it.
Yeah. And, I mean, just in my profession, I'm dealing with 16-year-olds all day. I'm 37. It's like, guys, I got 21 years on you. I know, like, I seem like I figured it all out, but like, trust me, like I've been up and down. I have not figured anything out. I'm still actively in the process.
Yeah.
All of us are, right? The last thing I want to talk about quickly is the concept of of sex and men's role in sex, because I love Esther Perel and her like work and everything like that. And one of the things she said one time that I thought was great was sex ed in schools is taught like plumbing. Put this in there and repeat. And she's like, what sex ed should be an intimacy class. It should be intimacy education, because that is what's missing. Kids, the abundance of pornography that kids have access to. I mean, we used to have to like smuggle into a bookstore, like have a bunch of lookouts, try and pull the Playboy off the top. And that was just like a girl topless. And that made our month. But kids have access to hardcore pornography now. They see the plumbing. They learn that in sex ed class. But the intimacy aspect about like, how do you guys want to be good at sex, but isn't that essentially being connected and intimate with your partner in a real way? And how do we put this off to like the ether out there, to the men out there, like when you are, especially young men, you're like confused about how a guy should have sex in a manly way or anything like that. And again, this is something that's weird to talk about for a lot of guys, but I think it's important that we'll jump on the grenade here and talk about it. And then maybe whoever listens can listen. But what are your thoughts on that? Like the importance of intimacy when it comes to sex? I know that's a big thing you've talked about.
Yeah, it's a very big subject matter as well. So I'll do my best to condense it in a couple of minutes. Firstly, pornography, we have to understand, is a distortion of sexual union. What I mean by that is it's acting. It's not real. So we get this idea, we have this fantasy that this is how pornography is. This is how every woman wants to be treated as men. Like this is what we need to do as men. This is how we need to behave, because we're seeing the men doing this and the woman is, supposedly quote unquote experiencing pleasure, but it's all acting. We need to get that really, really clear. The sex isn't acting, but the way they're experiencing that, for the vast majority of the part, it's acting. And so that's a distortion, and we have this false idea of what it is. Intimacy is a very individual, it's an individual connected practice. Knowing what your partner wants, whether it's a one-night stand or whether it's a long-term partnership, whether it's casual sex, whatever it is, knowing what your partner wants comes from being intimate with them, asking questions, observing the subtleties of their movement, listening to them in between their words, not only what they're saying, but also how they're saying it. It's a deliberate wanting to pay attention to that person. That's intimate. That's you being intentional with, I want to serve this person. I want to experience joy and pleasure with this person, and I want them to as well. Most people, because pornography portrays this a great deal, and I'm not just blaming pornography, but it's also the world of short-term gratification that we live in. It's all about, what can I get? What can I want? What do I need from this transaction? It's all transactional. And so boys are going into, young boys, 15, 16, 14, are going into having sex or getting or receiving oral pleasure or whatever it may be. And they're thinking, oh, this is what I saw in pornography. This is what I want. And women, females are thinking the same. Oh, this must be good, but this is what I need to do. And often both parties don't even want that. They want something else, but we're not asking questions. We're too scared to speak our truth. We can't be vulnerable. We live in a very fast-paced, short-term gratification society. And we're not listening to what that person needs. And we're ashamed and afraid to ask, because we're also scared of rejection and abandonment and being humiliated. Two reasons. One, because we haven't dealt with our stuff. And so it's always driving us unconsciously, our wounding. And two, we're not taught how to communicate in that way. And so there's a massive distortion when it comes to sexual intimacy. So my suggestion is, don't rush. Don't rush having sex. Don't rush being sexual with anyone, whether you're a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. And be present to the needs of what that person wants. Get clear on what you want first. What would be interesting to you? Where would you like to be physically touched or stimulated? And why? Get clear on that. Is it because you watch pornography and you think, oh, that's what needs to be done? Or is that because that feels good to you? And then get into the habit of also asking questions when you're in that partnership. Okay, what do you want? What would you like me to do? How do you want me to be? This is what I would like. This could be very embarrassing and very difficult, because remember, and I'm going to revert back to do your inner work, even as a young child, as a teenager. Because if you say, hey, I really like if you, touch me in between, in my inner thighs and stroke my penis in this way, and she says, oh, that's yuck, or I don't want to do that, I don't want to, that can be really confronting. You don't have to take that personally, because that could be just her preferences, and maybe how she explained it or how she expressed it wasn't the best way, but she's also human. Or maybe she expresses it really kindly and compassionately and says, oh, that's not really what I'm into. But when we take it seriously and personally, guess what happens? We become defensive and we shut down and we shut out. And then we just say, well, I'm just going to do what I think is right and not really do and be what they want or what I want. And then all of a sudden we've got two false people being in very vulnerable, provocative position, which isn't healthy if you're not being real.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Is, it's so scary to talk about what you're into sexually, that if you put yourself out there and she goes, oh, gross, you creep or you freak or whatever it is, then you just go, oh my God, I'll never open up to anyone again. Yep. But that's the courage again, right? The courage is, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to be honest. It won't be recepted well by a lot of people, but it's still the truth. And you will be served better because of that. And you'll find someone who is into what you're into. That's the cool thing that I've found out about the world, is whatever you are, and we're all gross in our own ways, someone is going to be really into that. You just gotta find who it is. And the quicker you are yourself, now your best version of yourself. So all the things that you mentioned earlier about working hard and having integrity and all of that kind of stuff, you are your best version of yourself. Someone will be into it. And that is good news.
Yeah. And you're eliminating the people that aren't, and you're not being false. Just, you're diluting. Sorry, you're minimizing the pool that you're drawing from, but you're increasing the quality of that pool.
Yeah, it's so much faster, just because you could be faking it for months, and then all of a sudden the real you comes out, and you just wasted months of your life.
Yep.
Stefanos, thank you. I hope that people, because you're one of the guests who I think it's really complicated. So I hope that people kind of dive into what you talk about and what you do, and reach out to you and things like that. Where can people get a hold of you and your work and things like that?
I appreciate that, man. My website, stefanossifandos.com, and you can catch me on any social platform, Instagram, Facebook, or not any social platform, but Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn.
Oh, you do TikTok, so okay.
Yeah. Actually, I just started not long ago. Yeah, a few weeks ago. Stefanos Sifandos, at Stefanos Sifandos.
Cool. Well, I'll tag you in the notes and stuff like that. Thank you. I really appreciate you doing this, and I hope that it connects with some of the people out there.
I appreciate you too, my friend. Thank you so much.
Take care.